Hello, family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name's Betty, and today I'm joined by Krista. And Krista is a near-death experiencer. She's a mom, wife, physician associate, dialing in from Florida. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to connect. I know that you've got a great story, and I definitely want to hear it. And I'm excited for your service to our community at IANDS. So I'm going to toss it right over to you.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, everybody. I love you all. So grateful to have found this community. People like Betty, who are creating these platforms for us to sort of come together and share our experiences and connect with one another, because that's ultimately, for me, that's why we're here, is to share with one another, share love with one another, help each other grow and expand, and just, flourish in this beautiful earth that we inhabit right now. And for me, this earth is a temporary plane. It's my home for now. And because I had a near-death experience, it's taken on sort of a different meaning and a different depth of experience from my NDE. So what happened to me was in the year 2000, I was in my last year of PA school, and I was pregnant with my daughter. I was induced into labor because she had a medical issue that they wanted to deliver her a week early. So it was, a beautiful pregnancy. I was very focused on feeling good within my body, keeping my stress level low, keeping my cortisol levels low. And I just really enjoyed my pregnancy. I just loved being pregnant. And I was as big as a house. And I went into the hospital to be induced. And by that time, I was so excited to meet her. And well, we weren't supposed to know she was a she. When I had an ultrasound, one of the staff accidentally spilled the marbles, I guess you would say. I don't know how you would say that, but spilled the beans. And mentioned, oh, girl, blah, blah, blah. And so, we knew we were having a girl. And I was induced, and about 13 hours into the induction, I started to have trouble breathing, and the nurses knew immediately what was happening. It was an amniotic fluid embolism that I was experiencing, and they went into action very quickly and wheeled me immediately out of the labor room across the hallway in the hospital to the delivery room, which was like an OR suite, and called the code blue because in the process of moving just from my room across the hall, I went out. I couldn't breathe. I suddenly had horrible shortness of breath, and it just progressed very quickly to the point where in the hallway I was trying to suck air into my lungs, and it was like trying to breathe through a teeny tiny little straw. And I guess I was making this horrific sound. And in the moment where I took my last breath, I remember it like vividly. I felt this peace sort of come over me from above and then in front of me. And then my eyes just closed and I was completely peaceful. And my next moment of awareness, now I know that some time had passed between, when I went out in the hallway, and then my vision was very far above the body, below the body, being me, but I didn't know it was my body. I didn't have any understanding. My consciousness that was there didn't have any understanding of a human life or any of this 3D existence that we're in. So I could see, and I had a feeling that was sort of just neutral. And I was watching below, and I watched my daughter being delivered. I watched somebody at my left shoulder threading something into my chest. I saw somebody take my daughter from the physician and turn around, and I watched as these black particles came kind of racing up from the body to where my vision was, and it created this sort of very loose static cloud where I was. And I looked over, there was this wall that was sort of fluidy and beige, and it had a wallpaper border. And then I looked back down, and I saw my daughter being handed off, and I and I felt this sense of curiosity, very strong curiosity, wondering, wait, I want to know what that is. And then I floated to the other side of the room, and that feeling became stronger. And as soon as that feeling grew within me, I felt a tug to my left, and I resisted it because I wanted to stay and find out what was going on. And it pulled harder. So I just intuitively knew that, okay, I need to go. So I felt okay, and just kind of released any resistance. And as soon as that occurred, I started moving to the left very, very quickly through the wall into this bright white flash space, and then through another opening into the same black particles that I was, but very dense. And I just was moving imperceptibly fast in this space. And I wasn't feeling anything. Again, it was still very neutral and just more of a curiosity than probably any other identifying, feeling to it. And on my left there, I turned my vision that way, and there was parts of the wall that well, it wasn't really a wall. It was like sort of a barrier space and dense particles, and that would be sort of fluidy in spots, and like mixtures of gray and white and black liquid. And then it would turn back into the dense particles. And I turned back my vision back forward, and I stopped, and this download sort of came like a funnel of information just very quickly. I couldn't pick out any one bit of it that said, this is what this said, this is what this said. But it was sort of like, and to summarize, it was as if all the questions I'd ever had in my life were being answered. And it came down to boom, one point in front of me, and that was love. And there was this like, oh, bliss. And it just permeated me and was everything. And it was expansive, like infinitely. And yet it was right there. I was it right there. And I just was like, this is, well, and again, I use human words. This is amazing. This is beyond amazing. And I looked off I just turned my attention to this little white speck that was off to my right in the distance. And it was sort of like drawing me to it, and I wanted to go to it. So I started moving in that direction. Again, it was as if my intention was a driving force. And the universe, it felt like the space I was in, and I call it the universe, because again, words fall short. You can't really give it a name or a label. And it felt like the universe was helping me to move me towards that spot. And my intention was also the drive. So it was like we were working in conjunction with one another. And as I got closer, this white space got bigger and bigger. And in the opening, there were shadow beings. And in the front was the shadow being of a little boy. And he was about like 7 or 8 years old. And he had indistinctly, but shadowy, like overalls and a round wide brim hat. And there were adults behind him, and he needed my help. And I felt I wanted to help him. So I moved into the space, and the adults sort of like fanned out to the left, and I went into this space, and it was like a cloudy atmosphere. And then I felt the shadow beings, all of them needed my help. And I felt back, yes, I want to help you. And at the same time, I was looking for the little boy, and he wasn't there anymore. And I wondered where he was. And then they started to come at me, dart at me and dart away, and dart at me and dart away. And I realized that they were taking my energy one by one. And I felt myself like getting smaller in that space. And when I realized what was happening, I felt, well, no, I felt like I was going to like go away, like disappear. And I felt, no, I don't want that to happen. And again, as soon as I felt that feeling, the universe pulled me out of there back into the dense particles, and then brought me through another opening that was the dense particles. And then I went through it, and it just opened up into this gorgeous landscape that was like yellow flowers out in front of me, and green rolling hills with dotted with trees, and there was a rocky, moss covered waterfall to my left, and to my right there was a dense evergreen forest. And it was just like, I felt like I just merged with all of it. It was love, I was love, we were one. And it felt like I could just exist there eternally. And there was no sense of time. Like, time was a non-entity. And then I was flanked on both sides by these very tall, beige, sort of humanoid figures. And they were in these like drapey sort of drapes, clothing. They didn't have faces, very indistinct. And everything was communicated through feeling still. Some people talk about like telepathic communication. There was no thought. There was no mind to think. It was all one mind. And it was all just through feeling. And they felt to me, you could stay here, you could go to what comes after this, or you could go back. And I didn't know what came after, and I didn't know what going back was, because I had no recollection of being human. I had no memory of any of that, or no recall, I guess is the best way to put it. Everything that was going on was all that there was. And so I sort of paused within myself and I just paused for a second and just chose to go back. Although I didn't know what I was going back for necessarily. I didn't know why I was making that choice. And they immediately, like, I started moving backwards, and they sort of turned in the opening and were facing me, and they communicated, if you go back, you need to share what you learned here. And I felt back, okay. And then the next thing I recall was feeling really horrible pain in my chest. And then the next thing I recall was of being in a bed, kind of like restrained, and that I was hooked up to, blood pressure monitor, and like had all this stuff. And I wanted to go home. And meaning I wanted to go to my physical home. So I was like there. And as it turns out, I was in the ICU. And I was hooked up to monitors and whatnot. And I decided, I heard like some noise or something over to my left, and I wanted to see what it was. So I climbed over the railing of the bed, and I remember my feet hitting the floor and just sort of like feeling like this is such an unfamiliar thing. It felt so heavy. And I landed, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. And I grabbed the curtain and I just flung it open. And all my family had all come to the hospital because I had died for 8 minutes, and they put me in the ICU, and I had been there for a day and a half. And they had intubated me, taken the tube out, started to decrease the medications they had me on. And that's when I came to. And so they, family rushed back over, got me back into the bed. And I was just very frustrated and saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. And they're like, well, yeah, okay, that you will, but not yet. And then I remember telling the nurse, who was at the bottom of the bed picking up a blanket, and I said, I'm a physician, and our name has changed. It used to be a physician assistant. Now it's a physician associate. But I said, I'm a physician assistant, and I'm going to be working for Dr. Robert Ford. And which was true. I had a job lined up. I just graduated PA school. And she just looked at me, she goes, okay. And I saw it later, months later, when I pulled my records from the hospital to see what happened. She put it in quotes in my chart, because they didn't think I was going to have a very high level of functioning when I came back, because of the amount of time that had passed without any heartbeat, oxygenation of my brain. It was documented 8 minutes And what had happened was I'd had an amniotic fluid embolism, which is the amniotic fluid gets into the maternal bloodstream, and the body sees it as foreign and starts to send cells to basically get rid of it, surround it, get rid of it. And it creates these little clots, and the blood is circulated back to the lungs, and it blocks off the lung vasculature, causes a respiratory, then cardiac arrest. So that, and after that it's often followed by the mother being unable to clot her blood. It's called disseminated intravascular coagulation, which is what I went into after that. So I was bleeding uncontrollably out of every orifice. So they had put me in the ICU and were transfusing me, and they stabilized me. And 36 hours later, I was very stable, and they decided to start to wean the medicine off and take the tube out. And they had prepared my family for me to require 24-hour care. And as it turned out, I didn't require that. And so that's the experience itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions, and I know that there's so much more after the experience, but thank you so much for sharing. And you actually closed a couple of loops for me. I love the language that you used. You said all of the questions that I had ever had were answered all at once. And I had a very similar experience, but have never found great words for it. So thank you for that. Something else that came up when you first started talking, and then I want to get into the after effects and how did you integrate this experience and stuff like that. But one of the first things you said was you called Earth beautiful. You said that this was a beautiful experience, a beautiful place here, Earth, right? And I'm wondering, what would you say to somebody who doesn't see Earth that way? You know, we have these spiritual experiences and we come back with kind of a renewed perspective, and we can see the beauty here. But what would you say to somebody who hasn't had an experience and all they see on Earth is suffering and sadness?
That's a really great question. And it's something that, oh gosh, that's a really great question. For me, how I've healed and continue to heal, because it's an ongoing thing, is that when the distractions seem so overwhelming around us, with a negative angle attached to them, is to go out in nature and connect with nature, because nature is us. It's our reflection. And when we can ground ourselves in her, I call her her. She's our mother. When we can, ground, literally go barefoot, take your shoes, your socks off, go and stand in the grass, go and stand in the sand, in the dirt, and just be. It is so incredibly healing. The trees touching trees, they communicate with us, and they have wisdom and knowledge, and they're so willing to share it with us freely. That has been probably one of the most healing things for me in integrating back into my 3D life and this existence here, is that nature is as rageful as she can be. She can also be just beautiful and calm and serene and nurturing and loving and supportive. That's my probably my biggest piece of advice, encouragement, is to connect with nature.
Love that. Yeah, nature will be here when we are not. So I really love that. Yeah, it's so anchoring. So thank you for sharing that. So yeah, now I have a bunch of questions about, well, the first thing I want to know is, did you tell your family what happened to you as soon as you woke up? Did you have language for it? Who was the first person you told?
Well, the interesting piece is that when I first woke up, I didn't have direct recall of my travels. I was completely blissed out. And I didn't feel the need to speak because I felt like everyone knew what I was thinking. Everyone knew what I was feeling. I felt everyone else around the room. And so I didn't see the need for words. But that I didn't communicate that to anyone. So they were just observing me and wondering if I was okay, because of the lack of oxygen to my brain. In the meantime, I was feeling wonderful inside. And I met my daughter on the 6th day after they moved me out of the ICU into a room. And they brought her to me on the 6th day. And I felt like I had known her forever. And I remember holding her and just like kind of, bouncing her a little bit, and then realizing all eyes were on me. And I'm like, oh, I better do something that makes it look like I know what I'm doing. So I started to count her toes, because I knew that that's what you did when you had a new baby, you counted their toes. But her, in the meantime too, she and I were like non-verbally communicating, everything felt very intuitive. Everything felt very, like I didn't have to think about it. I just knew what to do next. And when I got home, I continued to recover from the brain injury and the body injury that I had had. And it was several months later where like as the weeks went by, I would wake up one morning and all of a sudden I felt like I was more here. I felt more like the old Christa, because I was a different Christa, very different. I was almost like polar opposite. I was very type A before, very like kind of high strung, very goal oriented. And now I was sort of like very laid back and chill, and like everything's good. Everything will work out perfectly. Like just be relaxed, and just like I had no anxiety at all. And I remember waking up one morning and I had had my entire experience during the night before sleep. It had happened. And it was like I had woken up into a whole different world. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know like how to feel. I woke up, I yelled for my husband, my ex-husband now. He comes running into the bedroom. He's like, what's the matter? And I sat there and I told him the whole experience. And he just sat and listened. And he said, well, I'm just really glad you're okay. And I felt like, oh, you don't get it, do you? Like, you don't get it. And then I remember telling my mother on the phone about it, and her kind of saying the same thing, and just feeling really let down. Like, I'm like, you guys don't understand. Like, this is beyond like comprehension here. Like, and I'm like, what do I do with this? And I just really just spent the next, 10 years, like struggling back and forth. What I did do within that first like 6 months was I got online. This was in 2000. I got online and I found Dr. Long, Jeff Long, because he was a physician. And I'm like, I had gotten to the point where I was like, wait, did this really happen? No, wait, it's not science-based. Like, did I make it up? Because it was in a dream that I recalled it. But no, I experienced it like this. I experienced this. It was more vivid than a dream. So I messaged him a very brief message, and I didn't even give him much information, because I was still very like holding back, because I felt let down every time I tried to talk about it. I felt let down by people, and I'm like, I don't want to be let down again. Like, I just maybe I shouldn't even talk about it. And he messaged me back really quickly. And it was just the nicest message. And he said, pay attention to your dreams. And it's like that moment. It just gets me, just when I'm in this, it just gets me still. It's like that moment when you're really heard, when you're really understood. And it opened the door for me to start talking about it. So because I was Western medicine science trained, I was very scientific in my thinking still. And then I had this experience that changed my DNA. And so I spent the next 10 years trying to integrate the two. Mostly I pushed my experience away, mostly. And I suffered, emotionally within myself. I suffered because of it. I tried to be all that I felt I came back to be. I felt I was a good person before. I wanted to be a perfect person. And I wanted to learn what love was really here in the body, in the physical, in this ego-based world. So I didn't, and at the same time, I'm working in a new career. I'm raising my daughter. My ex-husband at the time was a traveling musician in a band. He was gone a lot. So I was basically a single mother. So a lot of my focus went to that. And all the while my NDE is like here, 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 here. I found the strength to make the decision to write it down, write it down and start to process it about in 2010. And I was going through a period of time in my life where there were a lot of challenges personally, in my marriage, with my career, because I woke up and I no longer wanted to be a PA. I had no desire. And I had just spent basically 4 years of intense training to become one. And it was all I wanted besides being a mother and a wife. I wanted it all. And now I didn't even recall anything I had learned when I woke up. So a lot of it, my first year out was a lot of relearning and oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, I remember that. And getting my bearings, but that desire had left me. What I wanted to do was I wanted to share love. I wanted to be that love. And how do I be that love in this ego-based world and all these challenges and yada yada. So in 2010, I just started on this journey of I am making the decision to sort this out, to find a way to be this love. And I know that if I can be this love, that it will heal my life, everything. It will heal everything. I know it will, because that's what I was shown in my NDE.
I just want to ask a question. I want to see, what do you think the biggest challenges of having an experience like this and then integrating back into life?
Biggest challenge is learning the balance between love and ego, between love and fear. That's probably up here. And in the subcategories of that, it would be learning to trust your body's energies in the information that your body is giving you in any given moment. And flowing from that, following that into the next moment, it's when we try to overthink things. And in other words, our ego gets in the way, which I love my ego. I embrace my ego. I love my ego. It serves its purpose all the time. But when the focus is on it, it distracts and takes away. So, it's learning through trial and error how to navigate one's life from the space of the body's energies, intentions, and trusting that information is right for you, and focusing on, rather than like what the outcome's going to be, just focusing on that next moment and the next and the next, being present. We talk about it so much.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've been encountering a lot of people lately that I hear them say that they're really jealous of people who have these experiences. And I think it's important for us as experiencers to paint like a realistic picture of it. Yes, we have these transformative, beautiful experiences. We get to come back and share about them and be teachers and leaders and shift thought for people. But there's also some major challenges that go along with it. Relationships dissipate. Your whole life changes, your whole outlook on life, depending on who you were before. And actually, that's something that I want to ask you too. What was your relationship like with spirituality before your experience?
Well, I was raised Catholic and, baptized, confirmed. And when I was 15, I chose not to go to church anymore because I just saw so much hypocrisy inside and outside of the Catholic Church that I felt that I didn't want to participate in it. I love the teachings of the words that Jesus Christ spoke. I love Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness, I think, sums up who I am. And what I practice from. And then the second part of that was spirituality. I entered into a 12-step program when I was 24. And I've spent that many years, almost 30 years, sober. So that 12-step program helped to sort of open up another realm of spirituality, another aspect of it. I had a tree as my higher power. And so nature to me has always been like has always been the magnificent and a source of great just comfort, I guess, to me. And I'd like to say, based like to sort of like bring that back to my NDE, for me, I co-created my NDE with the universe, with consciousness, the great consciousness. And so every aspect of it was purposeful. So the gorgeous landscape, the consciousness, spirit knows how much I love nature and how connected I am. And then I got to actually feel that oneness, in that experience, pure oneness. So, that I spent a long time in that sort of 12-step sort of spirituality space. And then I moved out of it. I was in PA school and I graduated. And then from there, it's really been about my energy's journey here. So I can't give it a label, my spirituality. I started meditating in 2011, and that was the catalyst for my sort of real like nitty-gritty integration of my NDE into my life and my exploration of different things. I say my NDE was the law of attraction in action. Like everything was law of attraction. It was love, law of attraction. Those were the two forces in my NDE. And when I learned about law of attraction, I was like, wow, And I didn't realize it right away because my friend was like, "Oh, have you ever heard of Esther and Jerry Hicks?" I'm like, "No." And then she told me about how Esther channeled Abraham, and I thought, well, that's a little kooky. So no. And this was after my NDE. So like this ego 3D world was really like I was like back in it, you know. So I rejected it, but I wasn't ready for it. And once I was ready for it, it just opened up so much more of my NDE to me, so much more understanding. God, yeah, that was key.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. There was so much in what you just said, you know, but I really did hear like community too, being in a 12-step program, having that foundational community and connection to spirituality, and then the evolvement, the open-mindedness, being open to having things grow and rejecting an idea and then being open-minded to accepting that idea later on. I really like that too. I've really enjoyed our time together. I want to see if there's anything else that you feel called to share about before we end our time together today.
I just want to say, I guess, just in general, with so much going on out there in this world, now more than ever, I feel like it's time for us as individuals to give ourselves the space on a regular basis to connect with nature, with ourselves, and with one another. And I would just encourage everyone to do that on a regular daily, weekly, monthly basis. Give that to yourself.
Thank you for that reflection. And I'm just going to do a shameless plug for IANDS. If you feel like you don't have connection to other people, we offer sharing groups online multiple times a week. We also have different theme and topic groups. So if you feel like you're lacking connection to others, I hear so many people say that, please come check out our sharing groups. The link is in the liner notes of this episode, along with all of Krista's links will be there as well for you to connect if you feel called to. Krista, thank you so much again for your willingness to come and serve our community, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. This is fun.